evening, everyone. I'm Noel Quintana, and I would like to share my experience regarding violence in um, in the subway. On February 3rd, I was about to go to work to my main job in Harlem, and it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I took the L train, and it's full, so I stood on the entrance on the other side of the train so that I won't be able to be a disturbance to the passengers coming in and out of the train. And while standing there silently, there's a man who boarded the train in Bedford, and he stood beside me. While while standing there in a few more minutes, he started kicking my bag. So I moved um, towards towards his back, so that I won't be able to be he won't be able to be disturbed anymore by my bag. And I put my bag in front of me. And but a few more minutes, he still kicked my bag. And then that's the time where I went inside the train, and I told him what's wrong with you. And that's also the time where he moved forward toward me and slashed me. And it's also the time where the train stopped and opened the door. So after slashing, he fled out. He fled outside, and I thought he was going to punch me because I had an experience of being punched in the past when I was walking in Harlem. But when I didn't feel anything, I saw the reaction of other people. They were shocked. And when I also saw his hand that he was holding a box cutter, I realized that I was cut on my face. So I put my hands on my face, and I felt blood. And I asked for help, and nobody helped me. And that's when I decided to go out and seek for help instead, because I don't want to be dragged to the other station bleeding inside. Uh, so when I went outside the train, it's on the end side of the train, but the booth is still on the other side. I knew that there would be somebody there. So I walked from end to end and and asked for help. And the lady there called 911, and then the police came in a few minutes, and then a few more minutes, the medic came, and they brought me to Bellevue Hospital, where they operated me for 3 hours. So I was scared because I thought I was going to die because of the bleeding. I always heard that most of the fatalities are caused by loss of blood. So that I was afraid of. And I was taking blood thinner. That's why the blood kept on oozing. So I knew it was hard, but I had to bear this experience alone. And luckily, there were a lot of people helping me, especially Father Julian from the Migrant Center, where I work as a volunteer, and he helped me through this. And also Joanne is also helping me from the Asian American Federation. So I thank them for their help, and also from the public for their support they have showed me and given me an encouragement. Thank you.
Where you live, breathe, work, exist in New York City, you are protected by what is oftentimes considered one of the nation's strongest civil rights laws. Our system is very different from the system that the police work in. So NYPD and the district attorney's offices that they work in are part of the criminal legal system. And so the types of cases that they look at and they investigate are going to be in the criminal legal system. Thus, we talk about hate crimes and hate crimes being investigated in the work that they do. In the work that I do, when we're looking at claims of discrimination and harassment, we are looking at civil law enforcement. So ours is a civil law enforcement system. We're looking at civil legal enforcement type of claims. One huge separation in that is that under the criminal law enforcement space where NYPD and the different district attorneys' offices work in, the types of penalties that one might see in that situation, you might see financial related penalties, you may see liberty related penalties where somebody has to do some time in jail or be incarcerated. In the system that I work in, which is the civil law enforcement system, liberty issues are never an issue. The types of penalties or damages that happen in my system is that the victim of discrimination or harassment. So in this case, if we're talking, for instance, about Mr. Quintana's case, Mr. Quintana, if he were to raise a claim under our jurisdiction, under our system, he may be awarded something like money damages or other types of damages, whether it's economic, emotional distress damages, or others. There's different types of restorative relief that sometimes flows to communities in our system. And then also we have the ability to penalize people who violate our law, our anti-discrimination law, up to $250,000 per violation if they are in fact found to have violated the law. So people oftentimes ask what's the difference between the work that we do at the commission and what happens with NYPD and the district attorney's offices. So I like to first draw that there are two very different types of systems. So in addition to doing civil legal enforcement work, my agency also does a lot of work within community, working with different communities that are targeted by discrimination or harassment, or are dealing with the after effects of discrimination and harassment. So we have 5 community service centers throughout the city in each one of the boroughs where they're working with different community groups, different associations, different consulates, different elected officials, talking to different groups about what their needs are in dealing with different types of, or different forms of bias or discrimination, and also educating them on what the resources are with our agency and other city agencies. As my colleagues from NYPD have said, the city never asks about immigration status. So similarly, under our law, immigration status is irrelevant for purposes of filing claims. I will say that specifically under our law, I said we have one of the most powerful civil rights laws in the country. One of the reasons for that is that we have, over 25 categories of protection, and included in our categories of protection are specifically if people are being treated differently because of their immigration status, whether they are, undocumented or they're perceived to be undocumented, for instance, if they are treated differently in employment or in housing or places of public accommodation. In the last year, we too have seen increases in reporting into our agency there's like, as I said earlier, there's a difference between the types of things that we look at versus what NYPD might look at. So we have probably a broader category of claims. We're looking at any form of discrimination or harassment, any form of bias. And so if you look at our reporting from the last year versus the year prior, we saw actually a 7-fold increase of reporting into our agency of any sort of claims involving anti-Asian discrimination or racism. So in 2020, we had over 205 cases of anti-Asian racism or discrimination reported into our agency versus the year prior, where we saw only 30 such cases reported to our agency. And, as I said earlier, we deal with that in different ways. Some of that may go into law enforcement, where something is getting litigated in the civil legal enforcement system that I described earlier. And individuals who are victims of discrimination or harassment can also seek damages. There are times where somebody may have a claim under our law, and their situation is also being investigated by NYPD as a hate crime. And in fact, our agency oftentimes speaks to our friends and our colleagues over at NYPD to get information on, the victim of discrimination, or if they have information identifying who the person who perpetrated the discriminatory violence, who that person is, identifying that person. So there are times that there are parallel actions taking place. Other times, if things are not being pursued as litigation in our law enforcement bureau, we may go into communities that are touched by these acts of hate or violence, again, in order to try to stabilize those communities. So, for example, last Friday, on Good Friday, when it was the Friday following the brutal attack on Ms. Vilma Kari, we went into the Times Square Hell's Kitchen area with other partners from other city agencies, as well as other Asian American Pacific Islander organizations across the city, and also neighborhood groups from Times Square and from Hell's Kitchen, where we went from block to block asking different businesses and different buildings to put signs up from a campaign that we've recently launched addressing anti-Asian racism, to put up these posters in their windows and their signs showing that they will support Asian American Pacific Islanders who are being attacked, and that they won't just stand back as bystanders not doing anything. I think particularly when we look at the attack on Ms. Kari, and in part when as Mr. Quintana was talking about the attack on him in the subway car, one of the reasons these incidents are so jarring, it's not just because of the brutality of the attack, but it's also the fear that people around you won't do anything, that bystanders will just watch and not report, not intervene safely, not do something. And so one of our objectives in doing our visibility walk on Friday was to put visible signage up in the area so that people could feel like if something like this were to happen to them, that people wouldn't just stand by, that there wouldn't just be people closing their doors on somebody that needs help, that people would actually do things in a safe manner as bystanders, whether that meant, trying to distract the person who is causing the harm, or calling the police if that's what's necessary, or calling other forms of help. I think one of the beautiful things about living in New York City is the fact that for the most part, we do try to stand up for each other, that people aren't just bystanders, and they do help each other. And I think one of the things, that is comforting about Mr. Quintana's story is he said that when he did, walk around later on and ask for help, that there were many people who were interested in helping him and wanting to call help. That's the New York City that we all want to live in. That's the New York City that we all want to be. The person's needs, their immediate needs, may not allow them to immediately call the agency to file their complaint. They may need medical attention. They need psychological attention. They might need to secure help for their children or their family so that they could be pursuing these other needs that they have. One thing, though, is that the statute of limitations for filing these types of incidents with our agency is 1 year. So someone must file within our agency. If it's this type of discrimination or this type of harassment, it must be filed with our agency within 1 year of the incident taking place. They could also file claims under the New York City human rights law in a court, in state court, within 3 years of something taking place. So there's more time of 1 year period. Organizations, including organizations like the Center for Anti-Violence Education and Hollaback. The reality right now is that while the organizations and our agency, we've been putting up many bystander intervention trainings, there is just great demand for them right now. So what I would say is if somebody is interested in doing one of those trainings, contact us at the agency. I'll say the number again, although I think they put it in the chat, 212-416-0197, or you could take a look at our bystander intervention trainings, what's already posted in terms of upcoming trainings, www.nyc.gov/human rights. You'll find it there. But whether it is something you're seeking at our agency or you're seeking at another organization that does bystander intervention trainings, put your name down on a list, even if it's a wait list. Because even though their trainings may be full right now, we are constantly, I know the other organizations are constantly putting up more training dates since there are so many people who have been requesting them. And again, what these trainings do is they really, they teach on what people think of as, the 5 Ds. So distract, delegate, document, delay, direct. And it really teaches you kind of ways to safely intervene in these types of situations. And sometimes that means that you can't intervene, while the situation is occurring, but you're kind of documenting what's happening so that later on you can help provide information to my agency, or you can help provide information to the police. Other times it means that if there's ways for you to safely distract attention away from the target of discrimination, that you're doing that. So many different trainings are ongoing. My agency also does them in other languages. We have not yet held a Tagalog training, but if there were people who were interested in us doing one in Tagalog, absolutely call into my agency and we will put one together. Because the reason that we've put other trainings together in other languages is because there's been a need and request for that. So please do reach out.
And as most of you know, I just arrived a few days ago and just recently assumed this is actually my 3rd day at work. And what greeted me was the last incident involving our kababayan Bill McCary. So we are working with all our posts in the United States in addressing this issue. But as I said earlier, the problem we're encountering is the lack of reporting, which we actually want to encourage. So that's why among the first steps that we took to address this issue is to activate our hotline. We are aware that there are cases of hate crimes and other hate incidents involving members of the Filipino community in New York and in other parts of the United States, but this have not been reported officially to us. So one of the reasons most likely would be what our friends from the NYPD had earlier discussed, is the apprehension of some Filipinos, especially those with irregular status, to report because they have this misplaced thinking that they might get reported and get deported, so they would rather keep silent. So we're taking steps to reach out to members of the community. We would be conducting more meetings with them to encourage them to report. I've talked to some of our kababayan and they have expressed serious apprehension about their safety when they ride the subway, etc. So we really think that it's important for them to share their stories so that we could come up with the necessary information to allow us to guide them. For instance, we only have 5 reported cases of hate crimes or hate-related incidents the past few months. 2 of those cases involved Noel and Vilma, and a few others. I met a Filipino whose sister was harassed, but she has not reported that until I think yesterday when she got in touch with me upon my request to her brother. So, if I could speak in Tagalog, gusto kong mapila sa ating mga kababayan dito sa New York at sa mga ibang lugar dito sa jurisdiction ng ating Konsulado General, na kung maaari ipaalam niyo po sa amin para makatulong kami based on sa sinabi ni Noel, iba rin kung kababayan natin yung lumapit at gusto namin maging tulay para masabi natin sa mga kinaukulan dito sa New York kung ano man yung naging experience nyo at ma-link namin kayo sa mga otoridad dito, mga offices na maaaring makatulong sa inyo. Huwag po kayo mag-atubili, nandito yung ating konsulado para tulungan kayo. Especially yung mga Philippine citizens pa sa atin, ang ating pamahalaan ay may nakalaang pondo para i-share namin sa inyo, especially those, for instance, who need help with hospital expenses or legal expenses. We could tap our Assistance to Nationals funds para dito. So, ulit po namin, may hotline po tayo, 917-239-4118. Tawagan nyo lamang po kami kung kailangan nyo yung aming tulong. At of course, we will be there to respond. We have instructions from the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, our ambassador in Washington, D.C., to extend all possible assistance to our kababayan here in New York.